Welcome back to the Abundant Culture Podcast, where business owners like you come to learn how to grow the valuation of their companies so they can sell in the future. On this show, you'll learn how to sell for top dollar and invest in profitable businesses around the country. Now, here are your hosts, Jazz and Joe.
This week, we're interviewing an advertising and marketing expert, Mike Verret. He has more than 20 years of experience and even became the face of the Hasbro Gaming franchise with the charge to establish the personality, attitude, and style of the Hasbro Gaming portfolio by creating a message the audience would never forget. And he's sharing that very experience with us today on Abundant Culture Podcast. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. I am so excited to get into this conversation.
Oh, thank you. This is a great opportunity. We met, maybe a month and a half ago, and to connect with you guys on this kind of stuff, I think it'll be a lot of fun, especially from what I've come to understand about you guys. I'm really looking forward to it. So thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So before we get into the meat and potatoes of the episode, I have to ask you, what's that backstory? Give us that entrepreneurial journey.
Well, the entrepreneurial journey for me, I tell people I started my business about 3 years ago now. And I tell people I was 45 when I finally realized what I wanted to do when I grow up. And I'm 48 now. I was in the advertising agency and marketing firm world for the better part of 18 years. And my last assignment was with Hasbro Toys and Games in Rhode Island, where I am now. And they hired me after my time on the agency side. They hired me onto the global brand organization, the brand management organization. So here I am entering the corporate world. And the first thing I'm working on is Transformers. Now I'm 48. That makes me 12 years old, 10 years old when Transformers came out. And that was my favorite prop growing up. So you can imagine the elation I'm feeling when I'm working on this brand. And I got to meet Peter Cullen, the voice of Optimus Prime, and have all these really cool sort of childhood come full circle experiences. And from there, I moved on to a couple other brands and ended up at Hasbro Games, where they shifted my job from product management to this franchise marketing face of Hasbro Gaming role, because they realized that I was very good with an audience and getting them engaged in what we were doing. So they would fly me around the world, and it was probably about 35% of my job, fly me around the world to present Hasbro Gaming. So I've been to Hong Kong and India and Germany, the UK, Brazil, Mexico to present Hasbro Games. And it was so enthralling, for lack of a better term. I really enjoyed the resonance that I felt and the satisfaction of doing what I was best at. But 65% of my job was still very much senior brand manager. And there was a lineup of MBA students in their late 20s, early 30s who would crawl over me to get ahead of me. And that just wasn't me. It wasn't who I was. And I started looking for another job. Despite the fact that I got to go to places like Hong Kong and India for work, I wasn't happy. I wasn't doing what I should be doing. And I started looking for a job either in another agency or in another brand, figuring that's where my experience was. But I got let go in October of 2018 as part of just a corporate workforce reduction because numbers were down. Think of it that way. It's a big, big company. And when I was called into the office, I hugged the VP. And I had to think back to why I was so happy to get laid off. But what I felt when I got called, I knew what was coming. And immediately I felt like this weight was lifted and I could focus on what I learned I could do best. Out of an organization of 8,000 people, I stood out as one of the top performers when it came to communicating with an audience. And it's because I understand an audience. So my immediate next step was, I'm going to start a business that shows people how to present better, because that's literally what I was doing. So a literal translation of what I was doing in Hasbro Games. And what I came to find was I'm really good with the audience in front of me, what they need to understand and how to connect with them, because I only pay attention to the audience. But what if I applied the same psychology of that, watching the audience, to an audience that's not? And what does that look? Can I understand how an audience is thinking to more effectively deliver a message on what a brand, a service, a product represents, and connect with them on their level? So I shifted my business from just a training business, basically, to what I do now, which is showing businesses how to talk about themselves. And it seems like everybody has to do it type of thing. But the reality is, especially with small businesses like myself, I guess I'm a solopreneur. That's what category I fall into. I have to think about everything. I have to think about accountant. I have to think about website. I have to think about marketing. I have to think about sales. What I can't afford to think about is, okay, what part of that is going to be important to my audience when I first talk to them and engage with them? And what ends up happening is it gets clouded and you're communicating the wrong thing out. The audience only cares about 2 to 3% of what's so important to you. So figuring out what that is tricky. That's where I come in. I give them their audience's perspective of their message, what they're seeing from out here and hearing and taking away from it. And I show them how to clarify it so that their audience is connecting with them and getting the information in the way that they need to really latch on to what you're offering. It was sort of a self-discovery thing, but it was all based on getting let go from a corporate position finally allowed me to realize what value I brought to that corporation. And I wasn't just a cog in the machine like I felt for so long. So the ability to step away from that and have the time to say, this is what I should do next, really sent me on my path.
So one of the things I always get curious about is, it seems like you really honed this skill set while you were at Hasbro. One of the things I was wondering is, so did you, when you came to Hasbro, did you already have that skill set, or did they kind of throw you into the deep end and you had to figure out how to do that effectively?
That's a great question. The way I would answer it is this. I think I was known for having that skill, and it's part of why they hired me. Because one of the aspects of what I was able to do was effectively communicate what our concepts were for the client and how that was going to work, and work with them to make sure they understood it. But I had a knack for just being clear and getting them attached to the idea. So it was almost something that I just did as part of me. When I was put into a corporate world, that felt sort of the opposite of, I wasn't able to do what I felt I did in the ad world, because now it was about production schedules and it was about marketing plans and showing it to the CEO, or, going up the food chain. And it became, everything's a list of to-dos, and there's a department for this and a department for that. And a lot of times I had no idea how to exercise or utilize what I did best. And it wasn't until the pivotal point was, I was moving from one brand over to Hasbro Games, and immediately I was the product or brand manager on the adult games category, which includes like Trivial Pursuit and categories and those types of games. Not adult in the other more colloquial sense, let's say. Hasbro hasn't gotten there yet. They still have the kid at heart, which is good. But I sort of inadvertently usurped creative control of our global sales meeting presentation. And I turned it into, imagine an episode of The Tonight Show, but there's no interview, just stupid human trick. And I'm playing the role of Jimmy Fallon. But my job is to engage with 250 people at a time, 7 times over 5 days, and get them bought into what our vision is, not just from what's on the slides, but how to experience. So what I know is they need to feel like the person, the kid, whoever, who's playing the game is going to feel. And that's what we created. So it's a 5-day thing in a convention center in Providence. And on day 2, the VP of our division for games said, "You're no longer a product manager. Your new job is Hasbro, face of Hasbro Gaming." He changed it on the spot, because that was like the first time that he could see that he saw what I was capable of. And the first time that I actually saw it in that environment. I had never had the opportunity to really do that to that scale and with that kind of influence on such an influential group of people. You have the GMs of entire regions like Europe and Asia Pacific who were coming through and seeing me up front and asking me to come to their events in their regions to help out. So I knew that I had tapped into something, but even then I was clouded by the other 65% of what was going on. So the real realization again was that trigger point of letting go of all that stuff that was just weighing me down. And I wasn't happy. I mean, I was going to bed sort of miserable and down and waking up like, I got to go back. It just, I wasn't feeling the way I should. I got a paycheck. I was making toys and games for a living. I should be happy, but I wasn't. When I got let go, it allowed me to say, okay, why wasn't I happy? What would make me happy? What am I good at that I could do? And that's where I landed. That's sort of the genesis of it.
Nice.
I love this story because, you just don't really get to hear about people in like these super high positions within companies and then them transferring over into, entrepreneurship. So I think it's so cool to have this conversation. So one thing I wanted to jump a little bit deeper into, like understanding the audience, because the listener right now, they're probably a business owner, or maybe they want to be a business owner. And that message is just so important. But before we get to the message, should you understand the audience, or let's just dive deeper into that?
Sure. I'll give you an example of how we already do it as business owners, but we just have it in the wrong priority. Okay. As a business owner, the first thing you're thinking is, I need to sell my service product, whatever I'm providing. How am I going to do that? Now, nobody gets into entrepreneurship unless they've got a belief. Okay. Right. I believe in this enough to start a business or run a company. That's not a rational thing that people just jump out and say, hey, I'm bored. Right? Unless it's a lemonade stand in the summer. So it boils down to, you're jumping into a passion pit. You're jumping into something with not both feet, your whole body. And you're basing it on your experience. Okay. So I was basing it literally on what I was doing at Hasbro. I translated into a position or a business that I felt like expressed that. And it was teaching other people to present to an audience. That was my literal translation of it. But I jumped in wholeheartedly. I got a logo made. I got all my systems in place that I needed, whatever, because I was ready to go. Now, the challenge with that is, you're thinking of everything from your perspective, everything. And you have something that the audience will see or could see of value. So your tendency is to lead with, here's what I do. Here's what I sell. Here's my offer. Here's my services. And a lot of times that manifests itself on a website for a new business, where you go there and it immediately feels like, we're this and look what we have. And what they're not thinking about, and is usually buried, and I bet you'll see this if you do it on your own sometime, is usually buried somewhere in the about us, where it's more about why they got it. And the purpose is usually something in their about us section where they saw an opportunity or something that they believed in that they chased. And typically that's where I find their distinguishing message. That's where I find where they stand out. So to put that in practice, I spoke to a friend of mine who runs a PR agency, and she has for years. She said, my website's flat, my traffic's down. I'm not feeling like, nothing feels new. And she's looking at all these different services she could create in a mastermind class and all these. And over a cup of coffee, we looked at 3 other PR sites and her, and all of them effectively said, we're a PR agency, we'll get your word out. Okay. That's more or less what came out of them on the first blush, say 7-second handshake with that message. In talking with her, the reason she got into PR, she has a knack for getting people out of writer's block. In her college years, in her university years, people in her dorm would go to her to get help because they couldn't find the right word. She sees that as an opportunity where businesses have the hardest time writing about themselves. They can't find the right words. In fact, if I asked you two to write about yourselves individually in flowing terms, and then give it to me and let me but if you gave it to me and I rewrote what I see and give it back, you guys would blush. Like, it's hard to talk about yourself even in certain. So now when people first land on her website, it says every business gets writer's block, will help you find the right words. Elegant, simple, but most importantly, what everybody in her audience is thinking. None of them, the reason they're looking for a PR agency is because they know they can't write for themselves. So for a PR, you don't stumble over a PR agency, you're looking for one.
Right.
If the first thing the PR agency does is says, we're a PR agency, you've got a problem. That's the bare minimum expectation at that point. But if you resonate with what their challenge is, I can't find the right words to express what I need to about my business, then they're attached and they want to find out more. And that's the crux of what I do. So to answer your question, Jasmine, it is about understanding your audience, but it's about understanding what they're thinking of at the time that they would need your service and how to tell them that. If a plumber says, we're a plumber, we're open 24/7, and you have an emergency, it's an easy decision to make. But if you're looking at 3 or 4 plumbers and one of them says things with plumbing are going to go wrong at the wrong time every time, and you just need it fixed, that's all we think about. Call us first. You've attached to exactly how that consumer is feeling at that time. So that's how I approach looking at that message. And the importance of the audience in that is it's common sense meets human nature. What's really going through their mind. They don't want to know what's wrong with the plumbing. They want it fixed because there's water in their basement. That's it. That's the motivation. You understand that, you're talking to the broadest audience on their terms.
Wow. It sounds so simple,
Yep.
but in practice, I mean, the reason why you have a business is because a lot of entrepreneurs suck at it in practice. What does your process look like when there is a business owner that has a product or service that they truly, truly believe in, but there's all of this, I guess, white noise that, you know, they have this product, they have this service, they have this promo going on,
Right.
they have this, they have that. And, you know, they can sell you on their customer service, or they can sell you on their product, or they can sell you on, you know, being the most convenient, or whatever the case may be. Like, how do you take somebody from literally not being able to elegantly explain the pain point that they solve for their customer to being able to get to that one sentence that you said for the woman was to, we know that business owners get writer's block. We help them find the right words. How long does that process take? And what's, I guess, the first step in doing that?
So everybody needs something nice and shiny to sell, right? I can't just tell you this is what I do. I need to have some way to explain it to you. So I've chosen a very simple principle that every single entrepreneur or person, I guess, business person knows, and it's the elevator pitch. Okay. So if you were to go to my LinkedIn profile, what you'd read below my name is I show businesses how to talk about themselves. And at no point, somebody said to me, I love your elevator pitch. It's so simple. I said, well, that's just the first floor of my elevator. So here's the thing, an elevator pitch, and you've heard it from Story Brand, or it's almost like a Mad Libs, right? Where you're filling in the blanks. I offer this to people who experience this and do this. It's almost like formulaic. But what's happening in that 10 to 15 second interaction is I have to fit it in and make sure you understand. So I'm going to use a term like I'm a marketing communications specialist. You are immediately going to assign value to that based on your perspective and your experience, and think you know exactly what I do and how, and that's it, not how I can help you or anything else.
Yeah.
But if I come out and I expect that it's not 10 seconds if you get on an elevator with someone, it's how long they'll ride up that elevator with you, then it gives me a platform for how to talk to them, to an audience that I want to keep in the storytelling mode and listen all the way through. So here's how I approach it. First floor is about building that connection. And it's as simple as, how do you leave intrigue to what you do to force them to say, oh, all right, well, I need to know a little bit more, so I'm going to have to find out more. I'm going to go right back to the PR agency world, just because I happen to know a lot of people in that industry, I guess. But this one fascinates me. A different PR agency, 35 years. Since day one, the woman who started it, you ask her what she does, she says, I make news. And stop. That's it. And now you're wondering, is she a reporter? Is she in PR? Is she an unruly celebrity who ended up in the gossip column? You don't know yet. You haven't gotten enough information. There's that need to say, okay, well, keep going. Second floor becomes that insight of the challenge and who experiences that challenge. And it becomes a regular messaging strategy from there. But thinking about it logically, if I tell you first floor, I show businesses how to talk about themselves. My second floor becomes, I know that 100% of what a business experiences is important to them. I also know that only about 2 to 3% of that are important to their audience, that time, to their customer. That's the challenge they're experiencing. That's floor 2. Floor 3 becomes your solution. For me, it's offering the audience's perspective of a business's message and showing them how to clarify it, to connect with them and take them through your message and your offer the right way, the way that they expect it. That's my third floor. My fourth floor is how I do it. That becomes my process, and I actually explain the elevator pitch. Then my fifth floor becomes my service. Not until the fifth floor. And the sixth floor, the penthouse, is call to action. How do I work with you? How do I get in touch? I'm not talking about the actual services I provide until the fifth floor in my narrative. So what that ends up looking like is one way to talk about your business, no matter what the platform is. If it's LinkedIn as a post, If it's on your website, if it's your sales pitch, or if you run into someone on the elevator, you have one way to talk about what you do and who you help. From there, all that you do to communicate that becomes very tactical. Your marketing levers that you pull, for instance, are basically just boats carrying your message across the channel to your audience. They don't have to be thought of as I need a social media strategy. I need an email marketing strategy. No, you don't. You just need different delivery vessels to carry that one message to the right audience. And now you know how to talk to that audience the right way. So if you handed the document that I create with you to a web developer, they know it's better than a creative brief to them, because they know exactly the order that the information has to be, and they can bring it to life the right way for that platform. And you asked the question about how long. Here's the trick. Small businesses, entrepreneurs, they can't wait to figure this stuff out. This can't be an 8 to 12 week process where we meet a bunch of times. This has to be, I need a website. I need to go out and sell myself. I need a capabilities deck. I need an investor pitch. How the hell do I talk about? So my process is 3 meetings. The first one is a discovery meeting. It's your opportunity to present your business to me, and I pretend to be your audience in my head. I don't get dressed up for it. And that's meeting 1. I go away a week. I come back and we meet meeting 2 to go over just an outline of what that message is. And we talk through it. I go away another week. I finalize it. We review it together. 2 days later, you have the final document. 3 weeks end to end. Then you are ready within a month to go and build the right resources to propagate that message, because you only have to tell one thing. And I also provide no more than 3 ways that they should be focused on driving that message and getting to that audience as well. So it gives them that marketing focus, because fun fact, human beings can only remember 3 things. That's it. If you've ever tried to remember and then write down a phone number, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You get the first 3, maybe 4 digits, you're always going back to check. We can only remember 3 things. If we could stay focused on 3 things, it builds consistency of delivery of that message. It builds habitual sticking with it, and it'll just build a higher success rate because you're not worried about as many things. So for instance, I use LinkedIn for content and communication. I'm a guest graciously on programs like yours to amplify what I do. And then I use one-to-one or group networking, but that opportunity to be on camera or on phone with someone to create a more solid connection and go deeper into how I can help. So it's a process that I've honed over the last few months, but the goal was it needs to be done fast, it needs to be done right, and it needs to differentiate. You have to be first, best, or different. So at the end of the 3 weeks, first and best for the most part is not going to be an option, but we figured out a way to differentiate you and make you stand out, because everybody's got the opportunity to be different.
I think that's something that I think a lot of business owners, it's almost like you try to get them to focus on this thing first. And a lot of times they're probably calling you in a panic because that it was like literally the last thing that they thought about. They put together the team, the product, the service, their processes, all that. And then they're like, oh, I got to sell it. I got to actually sell this thing.
Wait a second. This whole venture was to make money. That's right. Yeah. I forgot. A lot of times it ends up being over communicating because you feel like they need to know more than they do, or you're not taking into consideration whatever they already know. So I'll give you a very quick example. I worked with a wholesale plumbing supply warehouse or company that basically sold water filtration systems to plumbing supply houses. Plumbers would get it from there and go install it in the places that are needed. They would spend every month 1 hour with the same group of plumbers going through a 37-page deck on water filtration. Can you think of time more wasted than explaining to plumbers how water filtration works?
No,
let me save you the time. The answer is no. So what we got it down to was about 8 slides. And it was about the mechanics of how it works when you're with the customer. You have a water filtration issue. Here are the signs of that. Here's the product I would recommend. Take a look. If you'd like me to come back and install it, I will. That's as far as an interaction with a plumber needs to go in this scenario. All I've been talking about is plumbers and PR firms. My apologies. But they would look at it and say, okay, yes, this is how the plumber can make money just by suggestive selling when they see the hints of this problem. That was a 10 to 15 minute conversation and just reinforcing how the plumbers can make more money and make their jobs easier. The other 45 minutes is now spent with the plumbing supply warehouse manager to build incentive programs for the plumbers that he just talked to, so that the plumbing supply manager is pushing that product when the plumbers come in. And you get the plumbers handing out the cards to the consumer. You get the plumber supply manager pushing that product because he makes money off of it. All of a sudden, you've got a happy group of people and only 8 slides to do it.
I think that's awesome because, like, as you were talking about that, I was thinking about how Joe and I communicate, and oftentimes he over communicates things, and then I under communicate. Like, I may miss a couple things, but then he tells you too much to the point where it starts to get boring and he might lose them.
Yeah. literally happened the other day, and we got off the call, and then she said, "I don't even think they were listening." I was like,
so it seems like that's like that fine line.
Yeah. And
well, let me guess, Jasmine, you probably talk more in just sort of matter of fact general terms about things. And Joseph, you're going to be far more detailed and sort of like, well, let's talk this through and kind of make sure we've got our bases covered. And how are you feeling about this? You're my wife and you're me.
Most likely, yeah, because it's like I'll try to do it generally, and then I feel like, oh, maybe I'm not done yet, and then I go way too far with it. Whereas all they needed was like maybe 2 more points, and I think.
Well, maybe now you'll remember the rule of 3. They can't latch on to more than 3 points anyway. It'll help you to keep your message focused, and Jasmine, it'll help you to say, all right, I need to make sure they remember those 3 things. Perfect compromise.
and I love this episode because I think a lot of times people think of marketing as just solely a creative endeavor that can bring in money, and I think that is part of it. But that I love the fact that you brought up the whole plumber filtration story, because that not only was, it was a creative endeavor. It did bring in money, but it drove efficiency, which is huge, I think, to any small business, especially ones doing, maybe 6 figures, 7 figures, or even 8 figures in revenue, because now you're not wasting dollars that you used to waste. So I think that's awesome. And this is the first time where I've heard of a kind of marketing endeavor being used to not only bring in dollars, but also drive efficiency in the company. And definitely use that story again whenever another client, because it's like, oh, I'm probably wasting time on something, and I don't even know that I'm doing it.
I actually use my own story as an example of it, where it used to be like a 6 to 8 week process, and my price tag was down here. So time spent is up here and price tags here. Now it's this way.
Yeah.
Now it's 3 weeks, and but my price tag has gone way, way up, frankly, because I'm using a sales strategy of I'm just going to increase it until people say no. It's very scientific. Yeah, very scientific. But I'm seeing the same. If I could deliver in 3 weeks what I was doing for 6, I found efficiencies in my own process. And the only thing holding me back from hitting that timeline now is the other person's availability to meet. That's it. It's not. My system that I've created for myself was based on trying to figure out that efficiency and maximize that value. Yeah. And I think, one of the biggest challenges with marketing is a lot of people see it as I have to market my business, and they end up doing the things that they think they should be doing, or there's a lot of people on Facebook, so I'm going to advertise on Facebook. That's a very familiar phrase that I've heard a lot of times, but think about it through the lens of somebody buying a book. Okay. Remember bookstores? They don't really exist anymore. I know. It was always so nice to go in and feel, but look, I'm an unabashed Kindle user now. I think it's so easy and simple. But going into a store, let's say you're into espionage novels and you pick up 3 that you're looking at. Just think practically, how are you deciding which one you want to read? You're not reading the first sentence and you're not reading the whole book. You open up and look on the inside cover, the back cover maybe, and you read the blurb. And 2 paragraphs has to intrigue you on what 350 pages is going to take you through. And you choose the blurb, not the book, the blurb that intrigues you the most out of those three? So ratchet that to the importance of getting that connection with your audience first and foremost. I don't care how you're marketing your business, if it's Facebook or handing out flyers in Times Square. If what's on that flyer or what's in that ad doesn't connect with your audience, they have the easiest solution in the world: back button or scroll up.
Yeah.
They don't have to pay attention. There's nothing keeping them there. They have all the power. So understanding how your audience thinks about what you're offering and how they're thinking in that time of need, if you can hone in on that and talk to your consumer about that first, it sets the tone for that relationship. You've now brought them into what you're about to walk them through. And that's the key.
Amazing.
Wow, I have to listen to this episode again for myself because I learned so much. So we do want to start wrapping it up to respect your time. So before you go, we covered a lot on this episode. If a listener could only walk away with one takeaway, what would it be?
Oh man, that's a good question. I am going to answer it from my personal experience and based on what I've created my business around. So fun fact to answer this, I have social anxiety. You put me at a cocktail party in a noisy restaurant, I am losing my mind. I don't have to show I am, but I'm just losing my mind. And there's no place in the world that humans feel less comfortable than in front of an audience. But what the heck am I going to do? I have to present to an audience in my line of work. I'm in advertising and marketing on the client relations side. I have to be able to present to an audience. So in order to keep my mind off of everything else, all I focus on is the audience, what their facial expressions are. Do they nod when I say something or go like this? I know that an audience is binary. They're either paying attention or they aren't. That's it. If somebody looks at a slide and then is on their computer, they think they've already gotten the story, and I'm not doing my job if they're paying attention to their computer. So I'm always watching the audience. It keeps me from worrying about what I'm doing. It's also applied to exactly what I do for a living now. I'm always watching and thinking about the audience, always putting myself in their shoes. And if you could do that first, even if it doesn't get you to that 2 or 3% of what you need to say to the audience, at least it'll pull away 50% of what you shouldn't be because you're thinking like them. So that's the easiest thing in the world to do. I mean, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. That is the number one thing that they should focus on is their audience at all times.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really great takeaway because it really goes back to being selfless when you're on that stage. You know, I think that's a form of almost generosity to be able to stand in front of people and instead of worrying about, you know, how you look or how you're presenting, to actually be paying attention to what they need and how you can deliver that for them. So I think that's awesome. Yeah. So we feel the need to ask this question to everyone who comes on the Abundant Culture podcast because we always get very interesting and unique answers. And the question is, whether it be in your personal life, in your business, or even in your spiritual life, how do you like to spread abundance to the people around you?
That is a fantastic question. I would say it's probably more, I'll speak to it more in my professional life. That's probably the most, I just told you I have social anxiety. So abundance isn't something I want to celebrate all the time, but I'm the first one to pitch in and help if someone needs help.
Right.
The nature of what I do, I love the idea of hearing other people's stories and how they got into this lunacy in the first place. Okay. So what I try to do is provide something that will help, something to help anybody I talk. And I market free 30-minute phone calls for a reason. It's not just a sales tactic. For me, I'm learning all the time when I talk to new people. And I'm also registering commonalities in small businesses and what people are going through. So I would say what I can do to spread the abundance is if I can help people to settle their message, even for free on a 30-minute phone call, if I can give them an insight that's going to clear things up for them. And I see that, oh, that's what I was trying to get to. I see that reaction. That to me is a reward, and it's not tied to a paycheck. It's tied to the fact that I know what these people are going through. And if I can help them out on a 30-minute phone call, then I'm going to do that. And if the call is an hour, I don't care. As long as they don't ask me to put pen to paper or show up anywhere, I'm happy to help. So
absolutely,
that's kind of how I spread the abundance, I guess, from a professional standpoint.
Awesome.
So I'm sure the listener by now, they've listened to this whole episode and they're like, yeah, I need to talk to Mike. This is like a much needed conversation. How would they get into contact with you or your team?
It's very simple. You can either just direct message me or connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Mike Verret, Verret, like it's spelled here, or visit my website. You can find out a bit more about me and schedule time directly from there. There's a green button. It's Verret and Associates, AND associates.com. And I love just meeting and talking to people about their stories. So if we haphazardly get into some sort of business relationship of any sort, I promise it's a byproduct of just wanting to hear your story and how I can help.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming onto the Abundant Culture podcast. You shared a wealth of knowledge with us today, and we truly, truly appreciate it on the behalf of our listeners. I'm sure they appreciate it as well, but thank you so much.
Thank you guys. I can't overstate how much it means to someone like me and what I do, having the opportunity to be on a program like yours and just talk in these types of terms. It's a lot of fun, and I really appreciate the opportunity. So thanks for having me.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to the Abundant Culture podcast with Jazz and Joe. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe, then leave an honest rating and review. And remember, we're ready to buy your business. So if you're ready to sell or passively invest in other small businesses, go to abundantculture.co for more information. We publish episodes every Friday, so we'll see you next week.